My story is that I was 40 years old. I was typing at my desk and I was seeing other people getting promoted. And I
Mm.
was like, what is going on? Like, why am I not getting promoted? And the thing is, like, I was literally waiting for someone to come and tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, Rosie, it's your turn to be promoted.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Executive Exhale podcast. I'm super excited to have Rosie Zilinskas with us today. She's, if you're a corporate woman who's feeling stuck in your career, this episode's for you because our guest today, Rosie, brings a 30-year corporate veteran. She's a 30-year corporate veteran, I should say, and is here to reveal powerful principles to help you unlock your leadership potential and advance your career. And her mission is clear: eradicate the gender gap by empowering women in their careers. And this is so topical. Such a great opportunity to have this conversation. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Tammy, for having me here. I am very excited. It's always good when I get a chance to talk to women in the corporate world and let them figure out how they can advance in their career. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. Always like to start with you as the guest, a little bit of your story so folks can get to know who Rosie is and what brings you to this work. Like what impassioned you to work in this field?
Yeah, well, working in the corporate world for over 30 years, obviously, I saw a lot of people come and go. But my story is that I was 40 years old. I was typing at my desk and I was seeing other people getting promoted. And I
Mm.
was like, what is going on? Like, why am I not getting promoted? And the thing is, like, I was literally waiting for someone to come and tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, Rosie, it's your turn to be promoted. And the joke of it is that nobody ever came. And that's when I figured out I kind of got smart and I was like, that was pretty proactive and resourceful. But I had gone through a 4-year long terrible divorce. I
Mm.
was financially decimated. So it took me like that kind of set me back. And once I got through all that, I started focusing on my career and I went from an average performer to a top performer in 1 year. And that's when I had the courage to go and talk to an executive and be like, hey, listen, I'm interested in, exploring a management role. And his response was, really? And I'm thinking to myself, like, what do you mean? Oh, really? I'm a top performer. I'm training the underwriting department. I'm the resource person for my manager. Everybody comes to me with questions. I'm mentoring people. I'm doing all the things. And then his response was, oh, really? And I said, well, what do you mean by, oh, really? He's like, you never said anything. And I'm like, oh, that was such a learning pivotal moment for me. And I know that there's so many women out there that are in the exact same position. And so from there, I got promoted like 3 or 4 months later, I got promoted into the role of a manager. And that's when I started noticing that other women were staying quiet, not saying anything, especially we were hiring women that had just graduated from college, and the young men in the cohort were asking questions and the women were kind of like holding back. So I would always pull them aside and be like, listen, you need to speak up, you need to advocate for yourself. And that's when I started noticing the trend. So when I went from a regional underwriting manager to an executive vice president, but the second time around, I did it so differently. And I started campaigning for me
Right.
because I started talking to anybody and everybody and being like, hey, I'm interested in becoming a home office, employee. And once I was there, I just started mentoring and coaching more and more women. I started volunteering because at the time my kids were 15 and 17, and they didn't need me as much. And that's kind of how the ball just kind of got rolling. And the
Right.
more I volunteered, the more I was like, gosh, I think I can really help women. And now I'm an certified high performance career coach and a Colby consultant. I'm a keynote speaker, and I just did a keynote speech at Comcast yesterday, and it's just like the message that I got from the attendees was, Rosie, you were speaking to me. You were in my head. So I know that this message resonates with a lot of corporate women.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because one of the things I used to hear a lot before I stepped into my own personal leadership was you have potential. and
Mhm.
was never really considered for the executive role. I had my own sort of I had over dialed some of my talents to the point where I was like aggressive or maybe too assertive and so on. But that's my story. But I find that it so fascinating how women would not step forward. So then my next question to you then is then what do you think that what do you why are these things such sticking points for women, like the confidence, the self-advocacy, the negotiation skills? What do you think is holding those talented women behind?
Well, so there's a couple of things. The first, like the superficial things, are fear
Mm,
and lack of confidence. But
right.
then underneath that, once you actually start taking the time to reflect and explore how you actually feel about things, because we're so busy in our society right now that we really don't take the time to feel our feelings.
Mhm,
And but the underlying feelings are, let's see. So I'm not worthy.
mhm.
I am not lovable. I'm not good enough, and I don't matter. So
Right.
usually women fall in one of those categories, and they're these feelings, these emotional underlying uh limiting beliefs that sometimes they're not even aware that they're limiting beliefs. So that's the
Yeah.
point here, that you may fall into one of these categories and you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that's actually what I was feeling underneath the fear and the lack of confidence. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting how you say the notion of how we don't spend a lot of time in our feelings. And one of the things that I find intriguing with working with execs in my client base, especially the men in particular, is we spend a lot of time in our heads and we
Mhm.
very rarely go below the neck into our bodies, into our somatic, but we're whole beings. So
Yes.
really
Yes.
it's how do we integrate the feeling as well as our conscious mind and our thinking. So you're a big advocate, a big champion of the career roadmap. So what does that mean for women in the corporate world, and what happens if she doesn't have one?
Yeah. So the reason why I'm a big advocate of the career roadmap, and I've started coining it or changing the name a little bit to the promotion readiness roadmap, because women identify more with wanting to advance in their careers. And, it kind of goes down to, why do they want to advance in their careers? Well,
Mhm,
they want to put their kids through college, they want to retire, they want to remodel their kitchen. So a lot of times women they go to work and busy and whatever, but our careers are left on autopilot. And
mhm,
when something is left on autopilot, it's kind of like you set it and you forget about it. And that is the although it's a good intention, but it doesn't really do anything for you. So one of the things that I always tell my clients is, you have to be intentional with your career, and it's all about preparation, learning about yourself so that then you can explain to others how you can help them solve their problem. And so the career roadmap, or the promotion readiness roadmap, is really kind of that reflection. What is it that you really aspire to do? So that's the very first thing. And a lot of people want to do transition, jobs and whatever. So just understanding that it's really important for you to be happy where you are. The second thing is where you assess yourself. And this is kind of the biggest portion of the roadmap, because you want to figure out what your skills are. You do, the resume and the LinkedIn and all that stuff. But more than anything, what kind of words are you using to explain things? What is the script that you're going to use whenever you go into a meeting? And it's as simple as looking people in the eye, making sure that you have a strong handshake. So it's your positioning physically. How do you explain to somebody what your passion is, who you work with, and how you help? So the positioning statement. So that's the assess phase, where you really do a very deep, introverted overview and audit of your skills. Then you go into advice, getting advice from people. So this is, yes, going to executive and saying, hey, how did you do it? What can you do? But going to your peers and asking them, hey, I really need your advice. I want to go on and develop myself professionally. So ask them two questions. What do I do well? And what can I do better? And the trick there is to really give them permission to give you honest feedback, because feedback is fuel. It's not it's not anything negative. So and that's how you start uncovering your blind spots, because there's no way that you can see yourself the way other people see you. And then finally, it's that advertise phase where this is kind of where I went wrong. I did all that work, but I didn't tell anybody that I was ready to move on to the next phase in my career. So tell people, hey, I'm interested in. So this is advertising the fact that you want to do something bigger, something better. And when I finally went from being a regional underwriting or individual contributor to a regional underwriting manager, about 3 years into my career, I started campaigning for myself. And I was like talking to executives and doing that very thing. Hey, I'm interested in doing something bigger. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it looks like, but just so you know, I want to contribute and make a difference. And that made all the difference in the world. And then I finally got promoted into an executive vice president role. And Tammy, I have to share with you that it's not because I was the smartest person, but I was the most prepared person,
Right.
because I spent 6 months working on this career roadmap. And I was hands down the unanimous choice, again, because I was the most prepared. So that's what the roadmap is all about.
The concept of feedback as fuel is very powerful, because something I often say is awareness is power. So the more awareness we have, the more self-empowered we can become. So I love the notion of being able to solicit that feedback from those around us to inform our blind spots. They're called blind spots because we don't see them, right? It's
Right.
really
Yeah.
important to have those conversations with people. I'm curious as to, you also talk about the story vault, and I think this builds a little bit on the notion that you were prepared.
Yes.
I wonder if you could walk the audience a little bit through that story vault, what it is and how it can be so powerful for somebody who's trying to climb that corporate ladder.
Yeah, the Story Vault is amazing. And it's so interesting because I just wrote an article about a lot of people come to me and they're like, I need help with the resume. But they're trying to do it themselves.
Mm.
And so what I always recommend people is like, spend the money, hire a professional resume writer so that they could do the heavy lift. And then you prepare for the interviews or for the conversations. And the Story Vault is part of that. And it's essentially taking your accomplishments. I recommend having at least 10 different accomplishments throughout your career. And then putting each of those accomplishments, identifying what the problem was, what the action that you did, and then what the solution that you and your team came up with to resolve that problem. But then taking that accomplishment and putting it into a story where you bring in the emotion and the passion as to who did you ultimately help, because obviously there's people involved here. So you were the guide, but there's also a hero in this story. And so you're trying to really showcase who the hero was through your work, through your contributions. And then making sure that you're using really powerful and effective language when you're putting it together. So I actually just, went through this with one of my clients, and we have an entire spreadsheet of the raw story, the enhanced story with the problem, action, solution, but then we convert it into how does that really translate into communicating it to a leader or whatever with that emotion, like who actually benefited from your
Right.
story. So it's a really big difference into, going into an interview and just answering, well, what's your strength? What's your weakness? You can still answer those questions, but in a much more impactful way, and it makes all the difference in the world. And the reason I tell my clients to create this story is because we've all had situations where you go into a meeting and you're super prepared. You did all the research, all the slides, all the presentation, and you killed it. But you also have been in situations where you forgot about a meeting that you had to prepare, and you're like, oh man, I have to be in this meeting 5 minutes, and you're trying to navigate, like, what are you going to say? What are you going to present? And how do you feel in those two situations? In the one that you did all the research and the preparation, you're like, I got this. You walk in, you're confident. With the other scenario, you're like, oh crap, I hope they don't figure out that I didn't prepare for this. And you
Right.
feel, deflated because you weren't prepared. And that's the best example that I can share to everybody when you're going into an interview, being so prepared and know what you're going to answer is huge. And one of the last things I'll say about that is a lot of times people are like, Rosie, what do I say if I don't know the answer? I'm like, super easy. You say, you know what? I'm not really sure about that, but I can tell you about this. And then you pull one of your stories from your story vault and you still look like a rock star. And then when you send your thank you note, you can address that one question that you weren't, able to answer. So that's the story vault.
Lots of really powerful takeaways in that share with from you. I love the idea of the 10 accomplishments, so 10 stories that demonstrates how you've provided value or how you've stepped up or and I think that what's really powerful about that as well is if you can add on top of that, and it comes back to what I do with my clients in the wellness space, is reflecting on those exact experiences and what part of that experience made you feel alive.
Hmm.
What aligned with because it comes down to alignment. If you are doing these things and it makes sense and it's making you feel empowered and confident, it's because it's in alignment with what you are either good at, really want to do, etc. So, uh, reflecting on how it makes you feel, and again, just to build on that story, is the notion of story is look at a company like Disney. Now, not everybody's a fan of Disney, but let's be
Right.
frank. Disney, Walt himself was a big fan of storytelling. And the reason is because it hits you in the feels and then you never forget the story. You never forget what the company brought. Disney sells experiences and memory. It doesn't sell products, it's selling a story. And so
Right.
if you can sell the story, then you become an instant hit and they don't forget you when you leave the interview table, which I think is so powerful. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You also talk about you have a promotion readiness checklist, I noticed. Tell me a little bit about that, and how that can help them to kinda get to that next level. I'm curious.
Yeah, so the promotion readiness checklist has a lot of those tasks, I'm going to
Yeah,
call them, that you need to have completed so that you are promotion ready. So I
right.
also have a membership, and in my membership, we're kind of working through the process. And I'm not going to say that it's a super easy process because it's not. It takes work. And I always tell my clients, even if you take 2 hours a month, 1 hour every 2 weeks, and just focus on your one of the tasks. So the promotion readiness checklist kind of goes in and says, hey, do you have your resume ready? How are you asking for feedback? Do you have your LinkedIn? Do you have your story vault ready? So all of those pieces are for you to know how ready you are for a promotion. If a promotion opened up tomorrow and they were like, hey, you should apply, are you going to be like, oh, yeah, here's my resume, my LinkedIn is ready, here's my story vault? Or are you
Right.
going to be like, crap, I have to update my resume? And then you go and you like frantically are looking for templates and stuff like that. So the promotion readiness checklist will tell you how ready you are for that promotion whenever it pops up. And that's one of the biggest things. I always open up my membership meetings with, I want you to be able to advocate for yourself. I want you
Mhm.
to be promotion ready, and I want to build a community of amazing women. So that's a little bit about the promotion readiness
I love that
checklist.
because it's about preparing yourself, and it comes back to that point you made earlier of feeling very prepared and being more confident and less frazzled coming into a meeting or into an interview situation. So, what are some of the common ways that women unintentionally hold themselves back, or maybe it's a mindset or an action shift that needs to happen to see changes? And the reason why I say this is because I think there are some distinct differences with how women show up, how men show up in the workplace. So, what are the most common things you see in your clients that you help them overcome?
Yeah, so just yesterday I had a keynote presentation, and this particular thing resonated so well with the attendees, and it's the sabotage salad.
Yeah,
The, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough. Again, it kind of goes to like,
yeah,
I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not good
right,
enough. And it could show up as, oh my gosh, I'm not ready to be a manager, or I want to apply for this, but I don't have all the skills, so I'm just not going to apply. It could be like, I actually spoke to a woman that was a director. She was an engineer. She was a director of 200 engineers. And she came to me after the talk and she's like, Rosie, I still feel like I have like this imposter syndrome. I was like, oh my gosh, she's been doing the job for years and she
right.
still feels like she's not good enough. And again, it falls into those four categories. And it's so interesting because sometimes I talk to my husband and he's like, you feel what? And it's just like, and not all men, because some men do feel the same types of emotions, but men are just, I don't know if it's that they just don't think about it or they're just not aware, but we are so in tune with, we're people pleasers, we're rule followers, and then we think we have to do everything perfect. So those are a few things that, women are constantly dealing with. But again, it kind of goes back to that fear and that lack of confidence. And by doing this promotion readiness roadmap, the more you do it, the more confidence you gain. So that's why I always say I help women advance in their careers with intention while building confidence. Because the more you prepare, the more kind of like that example that I said in the meeting, you walk in like a rock star because you have all the pieces in place.
Now, I mean, I would be remiss to not bring in the notion of bias because it's something that I've personally experienced in a number of opportunities and timeframes. I'll give you an exact example where I was in an executive interview process. The interview was actually over, and the male panel member, and there was a panel of 4 people, and there was 1 man and 3 women on the panel for this organization. And the man on the panel asked me, and the interview was done now, but he asked me, "So, how do you plan on managing the executive world with 3 young children?"
Oh.
And I thought,
Mm.
"Wow." I was very taken aback by that question. Anyway, and how I responded was, "I'm curious if you would ask that of my male counterparts." That was my
Yeah.
response to him. And one of the female leaders, who was actually a leader of mine in the organization that I was reporting into, said, "No, the interview is over, Tammy. You do not need to answer that question." And I felt like she recognized the bias, the sexism behind the question. So I have to bring this up because I think that there's a gender gap issue that we want to eradicate. I want to get further into what you believe needs to happen to reduce that gender gap. But how do we then address that bias as individual women who want to go up the corporate ladder? And part of the reason why we don't step into our leadership is because we've experienced these things before. And we always wonder, is this the next thing that's going to get in my way? What are your thoughts on that? And I'm trying to keep it positive and not political. Okay, let's be frank. But I want to keep it positive. So how do we start moving through this as women who are professionals? We are knowledgeable, we're educated, we have experience. We have very strong ladies out there in the executive corporate world. So how do we continue to move forward so we can reduce that gender gap and reduce the bias that we're seeing?
Well, one of the biggest things that I tell my clients to do is to have a bank of phrases
Yeah,
that they have at the ready, like
yeah.
5 or 10 phrases that you know that you can like easily pull that are not necessarily rehearsed. Because I loved your answer. And it always boggles my mind that men still ask questions like that in this day and age. But
Yeah.
the thing for me is being prepared with what you are going to say pretty much at all times. And by the way, when you are prepared, it doesn't mean like be mean, be rude, still respectful, kind of like that answer that you said. Uh, but also stop apologizing, make sure that we're speaking in statements and not questions. So none of this is new, but we have to repeat it all the time. And I was listening to one of your other podcasts, and the conversation was like, as a leader, you have to repeat stuff over and over and over. And it's the exact same thing. We're having these conversations over and over and over because not everybody hears it, not everybody remembers it. So we have to keep reminding women that they have to take their power back. So that's what I believe is how we're going to continue to move through the world, by taking our power back and helping other women take their power back. And how do we do this? Through preparation,
Mhm,
through knowing yourself really well, knowing
mhm.
your values, and again, having those phrases at the ready when someone asks you a question or someone says to you, "Hey, you know what? You do a really good job, so I'm going to give you more work." Instead of saying no, thank you, you can say, you know what, my plate is full and I have these priorities and you're giving me more. Which one of these do you want me to take off my plate? So you're
Yeah.
not asking, well, what do you want me to do? You're giving a solution, but also making the person aware that you already have too much on your plate and you're not superhuman. So it's all about
Mhm.
preparing yourself and again understanding what it is that you want and how you want to show up in the world.
I love it's energetic boundaries.
Yeah.
That's what these are. They're energetic boundaries and protecting your own energy. I had a client, an executive client once tell me that she was one of the only females in the boardroom. And I remember she telling me one time that went in and they wanted to take notes during the meeting and they turned to her to take notes. And she's like, no, I'm an executive at this table. I'm here to participate. I'm not here to take notes. If you'd like to take notes, one of you call one of your EAs, your executive assistants, to come in and do it. I'm not doing it. She's like, I was insulted because every single time we go into meeting, they look to me to because I'm a woman. She's like, and I know that they're not doing it explicitly. It's like an implicit, it's like
Yes.
an internalized bias. They don't even realize they're doing it. But she's like, it was just like, no, I'm not. And one of the men who realized what she was saying was like, yeah, we'll call the EA to come. Like, you immediately realized. And so I love this notion of speaking our truth, stepping into our power now more than ever, ladies. Now
Yes.
more than ever, because we need to ensure that we keep moving forward as a gender and not going back. And I'll just leave it at that for the point of this particular wellness
Yes.
executive. I am very assertive when it comes to my leadership, and I have fought misogyny my entire life. And so it's something that I'm very passionate about outside of wellness, and something I have to breathe deep about on a regular basis. Um,
And I want to add one more thing about that,
yeah,
Tammy, which
yeah,
I love, but not all women are like that. Not all women can
100%.
actually speak up, and
Yeah,
especially the younger females.
yes.
So, the whole notion of really stepping into your power and having those, two or three phrases of, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm not, or I'm sorry, not even say, I'm sorry, I'm not able to handle that right now because
Yep.
we women, we apologize so much and we're trying to take that out of the conversation. But it takes time to get to that spot where you can advocate for yourself and you might still feel nervous and have butterflies in your stomach, but if you don't do it, then people are still going to treat you the way they're wanting to treat you, not the way you want to be treated. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and can I also add on top of that and build on that point actually is community. One of the things
Yes.
that we need to do is look for mentorship, and it's something that us ladies often are societally trained to just sort of manage things on our own in North America. We are not trained or sensitized to work in community. And one of the first things we need to do as a community, and I would encourage the younger listeners, if you are out there listening to this podcast, really truly figure out who in the office is the woman who's actually leading the charge that you admire the most, and
Mhm.
connect with that person. And
Yeah.
really, maybe they'll mentor you, maybe they'll support you, maybe they could be a sounding board for you when you're having these challenges in the office or when you want to go for that promotion. They might be able to support you. So I just want to encourage folks to bring community into this
Mhm.
as much as possible, because you do not need to do any of this alone. You
Absolutely.
can hire Rosie, you can hire me, but at the end of the day, in your office, you should be establishing these sort of networks of people that you can connect to, that embolden you and strengthen you, so you're not feeling alone, like an island. Because it's like poppy syndrome, right? The
Mhm.
poppy that stands up gets cut, kind of thing. You don't necessarily want to be the poppy that stands out, but if you find all the other poppies in the office with you, you're standing together as a group, and there's power in that. So just want to encourage people in that. I love the conversation. I think I could probably talk to you for hours on these topics, but I will kind of start to think. Well, there's one question I wanted to ask you, and it had to do with overcoming challenges and barriers. When you said somewhere that you've moved between countries and overcome challenges in these,
Yeah.
I'm curious about that story. What's that story, and how did that fuel or modify how you lead? I'm just curious before we close out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm 100% Mexican. I know I don't look it. Like that's the story of my life. Everybody's like, "You're Mexican?" I'm like, "Yes, 100% Mexican." I was born in the United States, but my parents took us back and forth to Mexico a few times. So I grew up in Mexico for about 10 years on and off. And every time that we moved, it was trying to fit in, trying to relearn the language or learn the language, because when I moved from Mexico to the United States in the kindergarten, I didn't know how to speak English. Spanish was my first language. So I learned English. And then when we went back to Mexico, it was like fourth grade. And now I knew how to speak Spanish, but I didn't know how to read it or write it.
Mhm.
So I started fourth grade and I had to learn a whole new language in a different concept. And then we went from there, we moved to Texas when I was in ninth grade. And in ninth grade, I didn't know what the class of 1987 was. I didn't know what a sophomore, junior, or senior was. My
Right.
parents, as much as they wanted to help, they didn't have the knowledge or the know-how to help me. So it was my guidance counselor freshman year that was like, your grades are really good, so I'm going to put you on the college preparatory track. And I think that person, and I have no idea who that person was. I don't even remember if it was a male or female. I wish I knew, but that person was the one that really helped me and saw something in me. So along the way, it was just learning to be resourceful,
Mm,
being resilient, because every 3 or 4 years we were going from country to country, and like all of your stuff, it just gets shed every time that you
right.
move. And so even today I have a hard time receiving gifts because I'm not a materialistic person, because we would just lose stuff all the time. But it all brought me to being resourceful, being the one person that needed to learn how to do things. So I think that formed me of like my love of learning, because I'm always reading, I'm always listening to podcasts. All my, stuff that I listen to is personal development. But it really brought me to helping other people that are coming up behind me not go through those different experiences. So that's a little bit about my backstory. And once I got to Illinois, which I live right outside of Chicago, I'm like, I'm not moving. I'm not moving. So my husband keeps saying, let's buy something somewhere down south. I'm like, nope. I'm just gonna stay right here. So it's just,
I'm happy with the lake effect snow every so
yeah.
often. I'm good with that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a little bit about my story of moving back and forth.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. For listeners who are resonating with what you're sharing, where can they find you? What are some tools? And by the way, folks, all the links to Rosie's information will be in the show notes, but I'm just curious just to vocalize, verbalize it, share with people where they can find you.
Yeah, so obviously on my website, it's nowomanleftbehind.com, but I'm very active on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is where you will find a ton of resources, a lot of different posts on how you can advocate for yourself. I also have my podcast. It's called No Woman Left Behind. And I think the one thing that I would leave the audience with is take action.
Mm.
Do one thing once a month and just start working on whatever your roadmap is or you want to create. Start somewhere. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, and if you guys really truly roadmaps are an important piece to you cannot it's like think of Google Maps or
Mhm.
Apple, whatever you work use, you do not get to your destination without some semblance of a map or some semblance of road ahead of you. So take Rosie up on her offer, take a look at her online stuff. You'll have the links in the show notes below. Thanks so much for being here. Again, this is a really important conversation today, so I really appreciate your time.
No, this was lovely, Tammy. Thank you so much for your time.
So thanks again, folks, for listening in and tuning into this powerful conversation today on Executive Exhale. If the episode resonated with you at all, I'd love to take a moment or have you take a moment rather to subscribe, leave a review, share it with someone who needs it. It helps amplify the important voices that I bring onto this show and to create real change in this leadership space that we're all working in. So you can find the resources, the guest links, etc., all in the show notes as stated before. If you're ready to dive deeper in your leadership journey, contact Rosie or myself. Go to executiveexhale.com to learn more. Until next time, folks, stay grounded, stay inspired, and remember to exhale.